do Nebraska football fans have PTSD with Marcus Satterfield from last year? Is that why we're having a hard time properly evaluating him this year?
Because of Sims?
Because of the PTSD of the Jeff Sims and the whole thing last year.
You know what? I don't know what the polling would be on that. I can't say that's for sure. I talked to a decent number of fans who that doesn't come up as much anymore, and they kind of gave him more of a blank slate, like let's see what he can do with a new quarterback and some of the weapons they've added in year two. So I'm sure there is some of that with a fraction of the fan base. Obviously, anytime you're a coordinator at Nebraska, these are the type of games where you feel like you're on the brink of something and moving the ball forward as a program. You have to have a nice night. Otherwise, you're only as good as your last game, right? That's the way it's always been for coaches in these parts. That said, I think you have to say they're coming off pretty good performance efficiency-wise last Saturday. And, you just got to build on that. And I think this is an Illinois team that can run the ball on a little bit. I know there's a lot of respect, as you've heard all week, for their secondary, some veterans back there and how they disguise what they're doing. And it's going to be a good chess match for young Raiola. But I do think he can get the assist from a good running game if that O-line comes to play, because I even talking with the Illinois guys, I think that if there's a weakness, that if there's something they're wondering about, it's how they can stand up against a team that really tries to run the ball on them.
BC, can I make an argument that if Nebraska fans didn't feel like Satterfield had anointed Sims last year, let's say that like maybe he wanted Casey Thompson in the room and Casey Thompson didn't want to operate the way he wanted to operate. If that was either public knowledge or if Casey Thompson had been kind of in that conversation, do you think we would still feel like it? Because I do sense a tension with Satterfield, and I don't totally understand why, because I get the offense wasn't great last year. I also think they were operating in worst case scenarios for a lot of the season.
Yeah, you talk about putting duct tape over stuff. That's what they were doing on offense for a greater half of the season. So you have to keep that in mind. It's fair to, if backtracking last year, they did have high hopes for Jeff Sims, and they kind of banked on him, being solid, I think, or being a good, bridge into the future of what they were doing, and it just didn't work out. So sometimes as a coach, you have a personnel move that you're kind of hopeful for, and it doesn't happen, and you kind of got to eat it. It's just the way it goes. And so, yeah, there's probably some of that left over. But I would tell people who are still there, like, let's move it. Let's keep our eyes ahead. I mean, if there's criticisms to be made for some struggles that happen the rest of the year, so be it. That's fair. But it's a fresh slate with a talented quarterback who's growing by the day, and you got some nice parts around it. And it does feel like they think inside their walls they've got some guys where they can really play to their strengths in certain ways and be very effective, and they kind of know what they want to do. So, we'll see if it works out or not. But right now, I guess you'd say that the arrow is trending back up, and now let's see if they can keep it that way.
Too soon, BC, and I know you know who you're talking to, a running backs guy, but too soon for any flowers to go to Coach Barthel's address? Because doesn't seem to matter when guys play. If they play, they pretty much play at a high level.
Yeah, I would say EJ's group's done really well. And if you go back to Saturday night's game, Dowdell didn't have a ton of touches. Nobody did because of the snap count. But on the first series, maybe even in the second series, there were like 3 runs Dante had where it could have been like no gain or 1 yard, and he got like 5 yards. Like there were 2 or 3 of those that I was really impressed with, and they're not the ones that are going to show up on the highlight package on the news afterwards, but they're the kind that keep you in a good down and distance situation. and kind of show why he is where he is right now, I think. And then, it was nice to see Emmett splash when he came in there late. I just love that guy's personality.
After not really playing last week.
Yeah, he just doesn't let stuff like that push him down into the ditch. He just says, like, okay, this is where it's at. I know I'm going to be called on at some point, and when I am, I'm going to make plays. And you have to say, through his Husker career, when he touched the ball, he's probably had more explosives than about anybody from that position, certainly. So that was really good to see from Emmett, and he's a guy you'd think could really factor into this one.
You just can't pull that off in that room without being a good communicator. Like, you have to be clear with kind of what the plan is, or the high level has to be, the trust level has to be really high, or guys don't respond like that. Trust me, like a bit, it has to be at a high level, because that's a tough position group personality wise, historically, running backs to manage, because we can be on the high, we can be needy.
No. Oh yeah, I can tell. Yeah.
Wow.
No. I do think, one thing I'd say though is, like, back in your day, Damon, Nebraska was that program that you did have to handle that, because you had 4 or 5 guys who were really gifted, and that was just, the stable was always full like that. So it's kind of cool that we're now having this conversation 3 games in the season where we really like where they're trending, and you like, at least 3 guys pretty well. So that's good, but I think you're accurate. It does take a coach with the right touch, as far as being transparent about, this is why we're doing this, and this is what we're going to do here. And obviously so far it seemed to work out, and it's going to be a long season. There's going to be something where someone has a setback, unfortunately. That's just how it goes at that spot. And so you're going to have to call on everybody. And maybe some guys we're not even talking about as much now at that position. That's how it happened a year ago, and it could very well happen this fall. And I think this coaching staff does a good job of always putting it in front of guys like, hey, we're planning on playing more than 12 games this year, and there's a good chance you're going to get called on at some point. You better be ready, because it's probably happening. And if you can get guys to really buy into that and stay at the ready, that's a good coaching job right there. That's like half the battle.
BC, I asked Ravi earlier if, because I think Coach Rule is getting ready to go on one of the shows this morning on ESPN. I think I heard it on my way in, I think 8:30 or something, and I asked Ravi, even though that he's been in Carolina, from a national standpoint to the good, is this different for him? Because I even think we talk about his accomplishments at Temple and Baylor as kind of like this yesteryear thing. But I feel like the national intensity has ratcheted up. Like, we jumped from not going to a bowl game to playoff dark horse. You just kind of casually referenced playing more than 12 games, and it's like, wait a minute, really? Yeah. Is there a transition for him as well, do you think?
I don't know. I just know that
there's not much he hasn't handled.
Yeah, I think he has always thought that this team, this program, was. He's given credit first off to some of the previous coaches, and I always respect that about him too. Yep. Some of the position coaches, he's always went out of his way to say that, and because of that, he inherited your guys like Gift and Ty Robinson and Nash, and we go down the list. All these guys who have been around and been through it, and they just have the right mentality. They have the Rule kind of mentality that was already sort of there. They just had to build upon it. And so I think that helped him, and it told him right away, like, maybe I can be a year further ahead here than I have been at other places, because some of that groundwork is there. I've always sensed that was the thinking. And then you walked around the building, a couple months ago, and I don't know if it's still up, but you go into all the, the facility, and you see like on the big video board, there was like the playoff bracket, with the 12 teams. It was like, here's where the bowl games are and the road to the championship. And it's in front of guys' eyes every day when they're sitting in like the cold tub, so that's, I mean, this is they have not backed down in their walls. I mean, they're not just talking about that all the time. It's going 1-0, but certainly that's at least been in front of guys like, hey, don't think you can't do this because I think you're a pretty good football team. And, you watch us chasing three things and you see how he communicates that to them before the Colorado game, says this is a good football team, and I think the guys believe they are too. And so because of that, I also don't sense on Friday night within the team, there's like this sense of like, oh no, how are we going to handle this stage or not? We'll see if they do, but I think they're really a bunch that expects good things to happen more than you would think for a team that hasn't been to a bowl since 2016.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. BC, I want to go back to the assistants there for a second. Who deserves flowers more but is less likely to get them, just the way we talk about the assistants? EJ Barthel or Rob Dvorak?
Maybe Dvorak. That's a good question. It's
like they're both really good, right?
Apparently.
Yeah.
I mean, the results would indicate.
And you know what's funny, listening to him ask that question? I feel like as a fan base, we felt the same about their respective position groups. We were kind of like, okay,
yep,
that's nice. But we weren't like, ooh, studs, right? Like, I kind of feel like that.
Definitely. They're one and the same, those two spots. And, Bullock and Bayer, just the way they have played off each other. I mean, Bayer, the way he attacked that Colorado game, especially after the comments, and he just backed it up. I love that, and I don't know if they liked that he said that or not.
Well, they pumped out the video on IG, right? And that came from the football department. Like, they backed him.
Was it after the game? Maybe,
yes.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
But whether they liked it beforehand or not, maybe they did, because I think he just said the quiet part out loud. So I don't think it was anything that everybody else was thinking the same thing. But the fact is, he went out there and he said, okay, there's not going to be two guys you're going to need two guys to block me on special teams when I come down there. And then he bulldozed someone over and he did that. He had the fourth down stop. And you're right. Like at linebacker, they're just getting an awful lot out of him, but also John Bullock. Rule had a comment before the season, like he's an all-conference type of guy. And I have to be honest, when I heard that, I thought, oh, that's kind of one of those, like, head coach says something nice about a guy. It's a little elevated from what he actually is. I don't know. 3 games in, he's playing at a level where you'd have to put him amongst some of the better guys in this league. He's just been all over the field. That first drive Colorado had in the second half, I know they got 3 points out of it, but they didn't get 7. And a big part was John Bullock was just every freaking where you could possibly be, it felt like. And he's had some series like that where he's just erased stuff and been a menace to the other side. So you got to give Dvorak his due.
Well, and BC, I think we also are forgetting Javen Rice not playing, who was going to be a starter. And, I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but doesn't he also get credit for, like, guys that we kind of sort of lump in with the defensive linemen, but are actually linebackers, like MJ Sherman and Prince Will and guys like that? Like, those are linebackers too. Like, we never talk about them when we're talking about Dvorak.
Good call.
Yeah, you get some credit for them. Jack Potenza as well.
I like him a lot. I like him, BC. Good dude.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's doing a good job, obviously, because MJ Sherman, you talk about someone who was kind of like
left for dead,
the running backs and linebackers, where it's like, okay. All the hype had kind of subsided from last year when he came in from Georgia, and there's all that. And then it's like, oh, okay, maybe he wasn't quite what we thought he was. And now people are seeing, okay, it's sort of like Ty Robinson and some of these guys. There is more there, and the staff has been getting it out of them on the defensive side. MJ Sherman's playing at a really high level, and Prince will. I mean, he goes 100 miles an hour, and occasionally you wonder if a flag or two is going to come out with it, but he gets there in a hurry. It's going to be fun to watch that as he keeps growing into that spot. He just is such a elite talent, I would say. It's not all there yet, but you can see it coming together, and it's kind of fun.
BC, how did I'd be curious to see, like, if you looked around the room and were like, he's not talking to me. How did the maybe I can't be so candid with you guys land with your cohorts in the media?
I didn't hear anything much about it. I'm trying to think what it was connected to. There's so many things that run together.
It was the special teams, because he was talking about how they've been practicing well, but they have to do it in games. And I think it was Bruntz actually asked, what's not translating?
Brunt,
yeah, and it was, and he took the opportunity to get into the negativity about the wide receivers too.
Yes, yeah, and so I think that's where it started, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't hear much about it from the media part. From our segment, it's all fair game. Like, the media writes stuff sometimes or interpret stuff a certain way, and sometimes the coach will be like, I don't think you interpreted that the right way. That definitely happens. So maybe that was one of those cases. I don't think it was a big thing. It was probably Bruntz. Bruntz just gets under people's skin. He's got that personality where you're like, what's up? You're still wearing the A's hat like they're staying in Oakland. It's just frustrating. So,
hey, that's a Miller North guy. Be nice.
I know. Bruntz is one of the best dudes around. I hopefully people know that. I'm joking. But, I didn't take anything of it, Damon. And I also think he's always doing whatever, like, he's speaking to his team sometimes, and he's going to protect his team in certain spots too. And that's what he should do.
BC, as we get into Illinois, which, we've only got like a minute and a half left. We've been talking about other stuff. That's okay. As we get into Illinois, what are your expectations this week? Do you expect it to look a lot like Northern Iowa? Like, I'm having a hard time kind of putting my finger on how I think this game's going to play out.
I expected the defense to come out with their hair on fire and have it tightened up more than last week. And I do think it's a big deal to have Bayer on the field for the whole game. I think, like you heard Tony White talk about him and Jamari, they do add some juice or some edginess. That's very true. So that's going to help. I think it's a big game for the corners. Tommy Hill's already sort of proven himself. But if he can do a number on, whoever he gets assigned to, whether he's facing Pat Bryant or, Franklin, I think that's good numbers for Illinois. If they can kind of take one of those guys out of the equation and make them a little bit more one-dimensional, I think they're going to be fine on that side of the ball. It's the biggest thing, just avoid those leaky yards so that a play that should be 2nd and 8 doesn't turn into 2nd and 5 like it did last week. And then on offense, don't turn it over. If Nebraska's even in the turnover game, I think they win the game. It's as simple as that. If it's a deal where you go -2 or -3 and play in Illinois' hands the way they beat Kansas, then yeah, obviously anything can happen. But I think I like Nebraska by about 13. I'm 27-14 with my pick.
That's our guy, Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. Known Michael Bruntz hater, as always. BC, we appreciate we appreciate the time. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, BC.
Thanks, guys.